Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our show, Media Monday on the IBM TV network. Today we have a really special guest and a very big lineup today, which is going to be our final day until September 20th. So let's bring in first our Pulitzer Prize winner, New York Times bestselling author, and lecturer at Syracuse University, the Honorable David Cay Johnston. David, welcome back to the show.
Glad to be here.
Yep, we're going to have a great lineup and a great discussion today. And of course, we also want to bring in our New York Times bestselling author, co-author of The Millionaire Next Door, the Honorable Bill Danko. Welcome to the show. Back to Media Monday. And of course, we have more authors. This person is actually a Fulbright scholar and is also an author. Let's bring in Larry Robertson. Larry, welcome to the show.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you here. And then from the IBM TV network, he is on a lot. Our own head of the Mark Lee radio show. Let's bring in Mark Lee.
How you doing?
Okay, and you're responsible for everything that happens today, Mark, as usual. And this is our special guest. Now, this special guest is also an author and a lecturer, a professional lecturer that actually teaches people how to speak, which I think is really great. And I've seen her show. She's actually runs the Barbara H. Smith Show, which is absolutely amazing. I would say Oprah moved over, but Oprah's not here, so she can't move anywhere. Let's bring in one of my favorite speakers, really hard to get a hold of, but a great lady. Let's bring in Barbara H. Smith. Barbara H. Smith, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, since you're the new kid on this particular block on Media Monday, you may want to tell people who you are, where you're from, and what you do. Barbara, so the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. It's just great to be here. I am, of course, Barbara H. Smith, but I am an international global speaker. I teach people how to speak better, how to communicate better, what they do, what they have, what they bring to the table, and why anyone should care. I teach, I speak, I coach, I train other people, their gifts. Sometimes they're not knowing what their gift truly is, their passion. And I dig deep so that they can take their gift to the world. Because do you know what time it is? It's time for you to step into your greatness because the world is waiting for you. And that's what I do.
No, I just think it's really great what you do, and but you are very difficult to get a hold of.
She's just a busy lady. She's been to Africa. She's been to all kinds of exciting places and everything. Okay. I just want to jump in really quickly because Barbara is a good friend of mine. We become friends, and of course, I'm the one that brought the show to the network and all of that. But she has this great way of telling people how she does her introductions. And I'm always fascinated when she tells that story because she describes herself, and the way she describes herself at an introduction, y'all are going to be sitting there going like, wait a minute, you did all of that? So Barbara, take it away and tell folks about that powerful introduction method that you use. And it's one of the tools that you give people about speaking and using your speaking powers.
Well, what I do is I help people to dig up stories about themselves and make them have a twist to it so that it's intriguing for the audience. How many times have you been to an event where the person reads their bio as an intro? No. The introduction is a totally different thing. And here's how my introduction goes. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to listen to this lady come into the platform. She was an engineer by age 3. An instructor by age 8. And by the ripe old age of 16 years old, she was a race car driver. Help me introduce Barbara H. Smith. Now, what just happened? 3 pieces of information about my story, true story, is in there, but it's got a twist to it. And I take that same technique and strategy and help other people craft an introduction, not a bio, to read to people, because I think it's pretty disrespectful to read to adults when you already have typically that information, the bio, in front of you, and then someone stands up to introduce you and reads the exact same information that you just read. So the story kind of goes, I'm 3 years old, my mother comes in, she gives me this toy. I take the toy entirely apart. I put the toy back together. I was 2.5 years old. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm an engineer.
Barbara, how did you come to teach speaking? What led to that?
Well, I started out in information technology, and I'm a geek with a personality. So the speaking came from being able to speak to geeks and being able to speak to normal people. Geeks have a whole language of their own, and I get it. But normal people don't understand how geeks talk. So I became the liaison between the geeky people and the real normal people. And so I started training just kind of naturally, because at 8, I was an instructor because I'm the eldest of 5. And so I've always taught my younger siblings how to do math and English. I always loved math. And so I taught them math and English and little things like that. And while I was in the United States Joint Forces Command as an engineer, I became the trainer because I kept training people who didn't understand information technology with the normal people who do know how to work and want work done. I would translate that information. So I became a speaker there. Then I started training at Bryan and Stratton, Thomas Nelson Community College. And so I became an instructor, and it was a natural progression for me. So that's how I started as a speaker.
Yeah. Well, what can you say about, we have a lot of book authors here, like Larry is a book author. So is Bill Denko, wrote a book called co-authored the book, The Millionaire Next Door. David K. Johnson's a Pulitzer Prize winner. How do you, or can you train book authors to speak? I won't even go say anything more than that. Can you train book authors to speak, Barbara?
Absolutely. Book authors already know how to write, but sometimes connecting with the audience in a marketing way is difficult. So what we train is what's interesting about you, because people really want to know the authentic you. And so I teach to pull those things out that you've long forgotten that will be intriguing and give you a twist to get them involved and engaged. And then you speak those words, because words are your passion. Obviously, you're writing books and you're Pulitzer Prize winners. You use those words, but with a twist about yourself. Now, we can talk stories about all kinds of things in our books, but many times we forget those simple things that we did as children or in our past that would be interesting and intriguing to others. So I help authors, as well as anyone else who wants to learn how to speak better, articulate the words, because they're not just words. They have to be done with emotion and with feeling and with excitement to get people's attention. And people love stories. And so I teach how to do storytelling if you're not really good at that.
Hey, Barbara, you're also an author yourself, so I'd love for them to learn about the book that you've got out and all of that. But also, I'd love them to know about how you became a race car driver at that young age, because that's part of the story that I love as well.
Okay, so the book just came out July the 13th, 14th, right before I went to, actually July the 1st, before I went to Africa, so that I could take the book with me. And it's called Speak, Coach, Train, because it talks about how I became a speaker, a coach, and a trainer, but it talks about how I developed my passion, how I learned what my passion was. I never thought speaking was going to be my passion. As a matter of fact, I used to stutter many years ago, and I still do today if I don't stop and pause. The race car driver story kind of goes like this. I was 15 years old, and my father owned an air conditioning and refrigeration company for automobiles. And he used to buy and sell cars all the time. He was in business for like 35 years, but at that time, he was probably in business maybe 6 years when I was 15. And he came home one day with this 1968 Plymouth Barracuda hatchback with a Hemi engine. And he said it was my car. And they used to race it. And I couldn't drive it at first because I was only 15. But by the time I was 16, I was driving that car very fast. So, ladies and gentlemen, At 16, I was a race car driver.
I love that story. Hey, Barbara, I'm sure the rest of the panel would love to know about your Africa trip because we are a global community. And I know that that was a very important trip that you took and that you thoroughly enjoyed. So I'd love for them to learn more about this African trip that you took to Nairobi, Kenya.
Thank you, Mark, for that, reminding me of that. I was privileged, honored, and delighted to be a part of the United States delegation of global speakers. And Dr. Reuben West was the lead for I Change Nations, the only global organization that recognizes great works of individuals around the world. And so we were slated to leave on July the 8th. I left on the 9th. I left on the 8th and got there on the 9th. And literally, some of the myths that were instilled in me as a young child were busted. Like everybody lives in a hut and all the people are poor. And it was amazing that I was in a major city. Nairobi, Kenya is like any other city, like Chicago or like New York or like Dallas. It was huge, these huge buildings and people walking around in the streets. And people that I know were asking, well, where are the real Africans? They called themselves Africans. Here's what hit me the hardest. I was speaking on a platform and I said, I got off the plane and everybody was Black. Everybody looked like me. I said, do you understand that where I come from, where the circles I'm surrounded with, no one is Black like me? And they didn't get it. And I said it a couple of times and they didn't get it. What I discovered after my speech was never to do that again. Because we define ourselves, African Americans, Black Americans, as Black. That's a color. They don't define themselves that way. They define themselves as Kenyans of the country. Like we should define ourselves as Americans of this country. But that's not what happened. But in any event, they treated us like royalty. And then when I say we've already heard the figurative roll out the red carpet, we went to one church service. They literally took a carpet that was red, rolled it out so that we could walk on it. They literally gave us the royal treatment. And so I was walking around like I was a queen in this country. People were gracious and humble and wanting us to be there and honored that we came. And so it was just such a great experience for me. And I know that there are places that are poverty stricken in Africa, in Kenya. There are places in America that are poverty stricken. So, to make that a comparison is not so fair because there are riches. And the other thing I noticed is companies like Oracle, HP, and other companies from here were there. And so I started thinking, why are these companies here if this is such a God-forsaken place, such a God-forlorn place, such a place that no one wants to be? And it came to me that there are riches in African countries. And people
no doubt about that.
Hey,
Barbara, I've also got to teach you about something as well, because you also had mentioned to me about a certain encounter that you had with one of the animals of the wild kingdom and that experience that y'all had there. So I've got to have you share with our panel that experience and what you did. There was the smart one that actually decided not to do bold actions, but you did have an experience with the wild kingdom out there. And I'd love for you to share with our distinguished panel about that.
So here's what was hilarious. We had some time off to do things that we wanted to do. We had some excursions. So one of the excursion was an African safari. Who didn't want to go on the African safari, right? So we had instructions before leaving the hotel. Do not get out of the Jeep. Do not get out of the Jeep. So this is smart. This is easy for me. I'm intelligent. Don't get out of the Jeep. We get to a landing. Now we're driving through on a not paved road, on a bumpy road, and we're seeing zebra and ostrich and antelope, and we didn't see the cats because the lions don't come out in the rain, and it was raining that day. So we saw all kinds of wild animals that you see, some of which you see in the zoo, not all, but some of what you see in the zoo. So we get to a landing, a clearing, and it's flat, and it overlooks a ledge, a cliff. We're in the mountain, and everybody starts to unload the truck. And I was saying, they told us not to get out of the truck. What did you? These are Land Rovers. Okay, I get it, but they told us not to get out. And so this girl here sat in the truck. I'm not getting out of the truck because just because you don't see the animals doesn't mean they're not there. So everybody else unloaded except me and this one other lady, and I did not leave the vehicle. Just saying.
Sounds like a smart move on your part and everything. Hey, David K., I know you've had a chance to be in the jungles as well. You've been in those jungles of New York and the jungles of California. So what kind of thoughts do you have for Barbara about some of the jungles that you've been on? And I think you've done some international travel as well.
Oh, well, lots of that. Barbara, there are two things I wonder about. You mentioned that you stuttered as a child, as Joe Biden does. And Joe Biden appears to have some tics that are with him because he self-taught largely how to get rid of this. Do you have any lingering effects from stuttering, and how do you deal with them? And what do you notice about Biden, whose critics, use that to say, well, see, he has dementia. And then I have a second question.
Okay. Well, I do have residual stuttering. But I notice when I stutter, I notice that when I think faster than I can speak, I might start to, but when I catch it right away, I pause. I do what they call in speaking a pregnant pause. It stays there for a moment. And then I'm able to go ahead. But I notice that as long as I pause, nobody else knows that I ever stuttered.
Well, thank you. That's very helpful. The second, many public speakers who are not trained, and I wonder how you train people to avoid these Hemingway-esque conjunctions combined with.
I love it, and that is an excellent question. So. You'll notice most of the time I don't say I do slip up once in a while, but I was almost beaten to a pulp with Toastmasters. And so when I hear I start counting them. It's so inherent now. I start counting other people's ums. And so what I do when I train people on how to not say is I have them record themselves when they do a speech or when they're preparing for a speech. I have them record themselves, and then I have them count how many times did you say and when they're cognizant of what they're doing, and I say all you have to do is just slow down. People think they have to fill in the space with something. They feel like they have to say to fill in the space. When I feel like I'm getting ready to say I stop.
Barbara, thank you. That's very interesting. When I was a teenager and I was thinking I might go into TV and radio before I discovered I had a face and a voice made for print, I took some lessons, paid lessons about this. And one of the things they had you do was you wore a device so that you hear your voice pretty much as other people hear it. And then you would speak into a tape recorder. We didn't have home video technology at that time. This is in the 60s. But speak into a tape recorder and then listen and speak in front of a mirror because those caused you to become very aware of these tics. But I am just astonished turning on cable TV, which is often running in the background of my house. I flip among the three major channels. How much and and monotone and all of a sudden getting, as we go along, very quiet. There is by people who appear often, not one-off somewhere who are in the news because some event thrust them in the news, but people who this is part of their public persona, their public position.
I agree with you.
Slip into these.
You know what's interesting for me is that no one tells them. You're doing too many ums. You're doing too many ahs. No one shares with them. And the other part that's interesting for me is People who need speaking techniques, tips, and training don't recognize that they do.
Yeah, that's real true and everything. I know that Barbara, me and you have talked about the fact that you're hoping to be definitely in that category that Bill writes about and all of that, the millionaire next door and all of that. So I'm actually going to toss it to Bill and see if he's got any questions for you and maybe even some advice as to how both you and I can move into that millionaire category. So Bill, I'm tossing it over to you.
Yeah. First, Barbara, let me tell you, I appreciate your enthusiasm. You're I don't know if you're wound up, but you're very enthusiastic. I like that. And I think that's part of good presentation skills. But let me ask you this. I've been in the classroom for 31 years at the university. And when I was in lecture centers, I would use PowerPoints. That's just the way it was. And when I got into the smaller classrooms with 30 students, it was whiteboard technique and more conversational. So my question is, especially about keynote speaking with large crowds, do you think PowerPoints are really essential? Or are we better off with a stand-up, no podium, just get center stage and do it?
I think that's a great question. But I think there are a couple of different ways to approach the answer to this. First of all, you have to be comfortable with you as a speaker, trainer, coach, professional. And a lot of people are not comfortable with themselves. That inner critic on the inside tells them that they shouldn't be doing it or they can't do it. But presentation, when you talk about PowerPoint was originally designed as bullet points. And how many times have you gotten before an audience and seen, or been in the audience and seen PowerPoint paragraphs? Okay. First of all, when I'm training, I train on presentation skills in totality. I don't just train the speaker how to speak. I train how to do a PowerPoint presentation or present with or without PowerPoint. I am a fan of PowerPoint because I know how it's supposed to be used. And I train and have trained in PowerPoint skills. Because one thing that people don't know is when I ask the question, who is the PowerPoint for? And most people say it's for the audience, but it's not. It's for the presenter. It's supposed to be bullet points. The presenter knows his presentation so well, or her presentation so well, inside, outside, upside down, that if the technology were to die, which we know can happen, you know your presentation. But the bullet points are for the speaker to be able to remember what they're going to say to the audience. We are graphical, we are visual people. And so PowerPoint presentations are supposed to be mostly graphics so that the person viewing it gets their interpretation of what they see. And then you as the presenter are articulate, energetic, and powerful enough to bring that presentation home for them. And by the way, the person who, I can't remember who said this. Was it Bill saying that he enjoyed my enthusiasm?
Indeed.
I am low key right now.
Actually, she is, and you should catch her show. It's the Barbara H. Smith Show.
Yeah.
Bill, I caught it, and I looked at her, I'm going, she's a professional speaker. She's got to be. There's no way she can pull this off without being. So then I went and looked at her bio, and I was going, oh, she trains people to speak. It all just made sense because I was going, there's no way she could do what she did on the Barbara H. Smith Show and not be a pro. Impossible. So that was my opinion. And so I told Mark, I said, I got to have her on her show. Right?
No, you had to have her. You've already got her on the network because that's going on the network. And we got another show that's on the network as well. Yeah. But I have to ask Larry his thoughts because he is a public speaker as well. And he's had the pleasure of sharing the stage with Charles Schwab and Colin Powell and all of that. So I'm sitting there going like, wait a minute, he should know a good speaker when he hears one. And I too am oftentimes shocked when I see politicians and some of the others that are out there in the public limelight that don't do a good job of public speaking. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about Barbara's presentation and also your thoughts about just public people that are doing public speaking. Because I know sometimes when I'm watching some of our local politicians, and I'm here in Durham, North Carolina, or am I watching some of our other folks? I'm going like, they need a lesson from Barbara, or at least a speaking coach of some sort or another, but they don't reach into that dimension. So I'd love to hear your thoughts, Larry.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. It's funny when Bill said, "Wow, you're so enthusiastic, Barbara." I don't know if you're just revved up today or not, Barbara. I have seen clips of you speaking. I've looked at your website. No, and I agree with you. This almost feels like a wonderfully mild version of the enthusiasm you always have. And it's interesting. I just want to point back to something else you pointed out, Barbara. This idea in answering Bill's question of, do you use PowerPoint? Do you not? How do you present up there? And you pointed out that you very much have to be who you are and what you're comfortable with, which, by the way, Mark, that was what was so powerful every time that I've heard Colin Powell speak, is he is who he is. Right. And he's going to be that in every way, including how he presents himself in a public setting, a speech, for example. But Barbara, I had a question that goes a little bit beyond that. I mean, you are this powerful presence. You've also created what I think is a masterful way to help others approach public speaking. For example, for those who aren't familiar with the program you put out there, the 3 parts of this discovery phase of helping people really understand who they are in general, but who they are that they might bring to a speaking setting, then planning how they bring those gifts out. And then I love the third aspect of your program, which is, well, where are you going to grow from there? So there's this wonderful brand that you've created. And here's the question I have for you. As you're growing your organization, you now have a team of people who do that kind of work for your clients. What do you do? What have you found that you need to do, or that's been most powerful to make sure that as others represent you within your organization, that the powerful brand that is very much Barbara still comes out?
That is an awesome question. And I want to tell you, that's a difficult horse to wrangle. Right now, I'm in the midst of creating the Barbara H. Smith brand of training. And so right as we speak, there are trainers on my platform that I send people to when I can't do an engagement. We have the wonderful Wade Randolph, who is an amazing speaker who was trained by the illustrious Les Brown. And we have Joan Bowling, who in and of herself is a phenom beyond compare. Right now, I have a couple other speakers that I'm grooming to represent the Barbara H. Smith brand. And I call it Represent Your Brand for a reason, because it's difficult for you to get the Barbara energy, because I'm just me, and you have to come with your own energy. Right. I think Nick said it best. I am, or you said it best, Larry. I am scaled down today because I'm so excited. The inside of me is busting at the seams to really just jump up and down and go, "Hey, I'm on Larry's show!" But I'm trying to be sedate and calm and relaxed. But I'm so excited to be here. But your question, to answer it, it's not an easy task to make sure that the brand goes forward. But I review what they're doing from time to time to see not only are they representing the brand Barbara H. Smith well, but are they representing themselves well? Because it's more important for me to not just represent my brand, but for them to represent themselves well. And so far, I haven't had an issue with it, but I'm grooming as I go.
Yeah, thank you for answering that, because I think it's a powerful challenge for anybody who, as an individual, is such a significant asset to their business, and then is trying to expand beyond that. Barbara, if you would allow me, I'd love to ask you too a question that's related to those you help, to your clients. Okay. You talk a lot in your blogs and in some of your short video clips about the importance of intention. And I'm curious about how I appreciate the vitalness of that in any time, but right now in a deeply uncertain world, has that taken on any new meaning as you work with your clients?
Well, I don't think the word intention takes on a new meaning. I think the word integrity does, though, because everybody's intention, well, not everybody, but let's put it this way. Most people in business intention is to serve people, serve your client in the best way possible. But I think the integrity sometimes gets lost because people are trying to make a dollar. It's more about the dollar than the integrity. And for me, integrity is everything. It's an integral part of who I am and how I perform in the world. And so I make sure that not only is their intention lined up, but their integrity has to be lined up with their intention. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Makes a lot of sense. Hey, Barbara, who were some of the folks that influenced you? You mentioned Les Brown, but who were some of the folks that influenced you as a speaker? And a follow-up question to that, or a second part of that question is, who are some of the interviews that have really resonated with you as you've been doing the Barbara H. Smith show here on the network and all of that? And then eventually we'll also talk about the show that you are and Lotus are also bringing to the network as well. But I'd love to hear, one, the folks that have influenced you as a speaker and some of your favorite interviews so far.
Oh, people that have influenced me. This may surprise you. Zig Ziglar, Jim Rohn, Les Brown, T.D. Jakes, Eric Thomas. There are so many people. I look at Oprah. I look at Denzel Washington. I look at different people on mute. That makes sense. I listen to them, but I watch what they do. And Zig is like one of my favorites. Zig Ziglar is one of my favorites. But I'm more watching what they do than just listening to their speech. I can motivate myself. I can motivate myself, but I'm watching for technique. Do they walk? Do they pause? Do they pose? Are they speaking fast? Are they speaking slow? Because one thing I absolutely abhor is a monotone speaker. Because I can imitate being monotone just only for about a few minutes, and then it gets on my last nerve. So I absolutely, so people on my show that have been phenomenal, most people on my show are phenomenal. I don't know why that is, but Dr. Reuben West was phenomenal. Dr. Victor Clark was phenomenal. Holly Bird was phenomenal. They bring a different flavor, if you will. And Bruce George probably was one of my favorites because he said I got him in trouble. And I said, how did I get you in trouble? He said, because I was saying things on my show, on your show, that I wasn't supposed to be saying. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, you have this way of making people feel so comfortable that they'll tell you all of their dirty laundry. I was like, oh, that's good. That's good information. And tell me more.
Yeah, that's real true and everything. Nick, that's definitely one of the tricks that I've learned from interviewing, and I'm sure you've learned it as well, is that too often I find that the interviewers throughout, whether it's on our network or whether it's the big channels and everything, and I'm sure even David Kay would agree with this as well, that they're spending too much time engaging in their feeling of being in the moment. They're not actually listening, and you actually have to listen, and you also have to involve everybody. You'll notice that I intentionally did round robin, including coming back to you, because I know a little bit about the history of everybody, and I was going to bring them into the conversation with Barbara. So I think that those are some of the tricks of good interviewers and all of that, but you have to actually listen to what people are saying. And I find too often that interviewers, as well as public speakers, do not do a great job of listening.
Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, I could tell when I saw her show, and the Barbara H. Smith show, which everybody should see, because you're right, she's low key today. On that show, she's not low key at all. But when I watched her show, Mark, I could tell that she was a professional speaker. I mean, it was just clear to me. But, I spent a lot of time. Actually, I spent 10 years myself on the speaking circuit. So I did over 1,000 presentations in every major city in the country. And what I was speaking on was estate planning, believe it or not, to wealthy individuals. And I made a lot of money doing it. But we choreographed everything down to the T. And then we went and took courses from people like Barbara and Zig Ziglar. We took it seriously. The only reason it became a multi-million-dollar company is we took it seriously. I don't do this anymore because, frankly, what she does is a lot of work. Okay, And so I was going like, wow, what a lot of work. But but you can actually tell that the professional speakers. Then you go to the University of Miami Estate Planning Institute and you listen to the speakers, and these are attorneys. They're horrible. They're absolutely horrible.
Tell
They're
them, pay me, I can teach them.
You wouldn't believe it, but lawyers need to be trained how to speak in front of a room. Barbara, they would bore you to death. They read the code, they read the regs, they get up there and I'm going, why am I here? The only reason I need my continuing education credits, which is the reason most of the people are in the room. But in terms of it being exciting, it isn't. Now where Bill Denko is going to, the Asset Foundation, I think that's coming up in September, October, Bill.
September 13th.
Yeah, all those speakers there are really good. And so after a while, you can tell who the pros are and who, well, they're just not there yet. And frankly, at the Asset Foundation where Bill speaks at, if you're not really good, you're out the door. I mean, it's just the way it is. And then in the speaking circuit.
Nick, you need to try going to a litigators conference. There you'll get first-rate speaking.
Are they good
they're
at
all
litigators?
performed courtroom actors.
Oh, really? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. An ABA litigation conference, probably all good speakers. But I can tell you at a tax conference, they're not.
Oh, I've been more than I care to think about.
It's absolutely horrible. I cry and cringe. But so when I saw Barbara, I was going, there's no way she could do the way she was doing it. The pregnant pauses, her whole show, unless she was a pro. It's impossible. I've seen too many people. So I told Mark, I said, I got to meet this lady before I go on vacation for a month, which is what I'm doing.
Vacation to Europe, and you're just making us jealous between you going to Europe and Barbara going to Africa. And I'm sitting there going like, I haven't had a global trip in who knows when and all of that. So like I said, I've got to figure out how to get to some of these various countries as well. Hey, Barbara, if you would, I'd love for you to share a little bit about the new show that we're bringing to the network as well, which is Face the News. I like to put it in that concept of point counterpoint, because we're talking about issues and the things of that nature, but you're taking one side. I think you're always pro, and our good friend Lotus Richer is on the con side. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that new show that is coming to the network now on the Thursdays. And by the way, you can catch Barbara Tuesday at 8:00 right here on this lovely network.
Well, thanks, Mark, for that. Face the News is going to be one of the antagonist, protagonist kind of shows where Lotus takes one side and I take one side, and we search the news for what's hot and happening, but we take a side based on what our viewers are saying. And we go against each other in such a way that is almost comedic at times about what the news is about. And we invite our audience to chime in on what the topics of the day are. And so it's pretty interesting. It's pretty cool. It's not an interview type of show like the Barbara H. Smith show or one of Lotus's shows, but it's more of a point counterpoint kind of show, like Mark said. So it's going to be pretty interesting. It just started, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's definitely going really well. We're going to have to bring David Kay in since he's got that DC report and all of that. So definitely we're going to have to bring him in. And I know that there's efforts to try to bring that to the network as well. But definitely I'd love to hear your thoughts just about news coverage these days, David Kay, because I know one of the things we did is we just had our Olympic coverage. So our whole week of Olympic coverage, which I thought we handled well and all of that. And we had the pleasure of bringing in even a synchronized swimmer. That's what it's called now and everything. But actually, I think it's artistic swimming now. But at the time she competed in the one of the 80s Olympics, it was definitely synchronized swimming because she was at the Seoul Games, that being Michelle Cameron Coulter. And then we've also had Fran Harris, who is a WNBA person, come on and share their thoughts. But just in general, what is your thoughts about the way news is going in general these days?
Well, sports news is doing very well because there's still a solid commercial advertising base for it. And in addition, a large portion of your cable TV fees, if you're part of the shrinking number of people in cable TV, goes to sports. I mean, ESPN alone gets about $5 a month from everyone who signs up for cable TV, and they're not the only ones getting money out of this. General news, where I spent 50 years of my life, the fastest disappearing white-collar job in America in this century is journalist.
Wow.
And with the notable exception of the New York Times and the Washington Post, and to some extent the LA Times, everywhere else, newsrooms have just shrunk like crazy. When I was at the Philadelphia Inquirer in the late 80s and early 90s, there were almost 300 journalists from about 25 organizations covering various aspects of city government, schools, courts, police, city hall. There are now only 50 at most reporters. And as a result, a couple of things have happened. The more important, difficult stories that take time and skill, fewer of those get reported. And of course, if you're a kleptocrat politician, this is just wonderful because the likelihood you're going to get caught or found goes way down. And there's a policing element to beat coverage of places. I mean, years ago, the mob reporter for the Inquirer, George Anastasia, and I went to interview a state senator about Merv Griffin's mob connections. He was mobbed up to his eyeballs. And as we got ready to leave the state senator's office, he was a lawyer, worked out of one of the big painted lady house that was just gorgeously preserved. He said to me, because I'd never met him, he says, "You know why I never took a dime?" And I said, "Excuse me?" And he said, I'm a Democrat in the Jersey legislature. I'm a senior senator. I have I'm chairing committees. And I get temptation putting me in front of me every day. And I'll tell you why I've never taken a dime. Because I've known George since we were in high school, and I know that if I took money, George would find it, and he'd report it, and he'd be standing there with his notebook while I'm led off in handcuffs to prison. And that's, I mean, it isn't a perfect system, but it was a significant system. There's a lot less fear of that. And to the question, Nick, you posed in writing there, of course, I'm not a journalism major. I was a front page staff writer at the San Jose Mercury when I was 19 years old, solved my first murder case when I was 21 years old. Wow. I'm not a fan of journalism schools except for going to learn structure. That's the most difficult thing for most journalists is the structure of stories. I always encourage young people, get a degree in hard science, history, statistics, chemistry, and then take journalism just to learn about technique for writing. Take 101 and 102 in magazine writing, and advanced magazine writing will give you structure, and that's all you need to take. The rest of it is falderall. If you're in text, if you're a photographer, there are other things I would tell you to take, but fundamentally get a degree in something else, history, hard science, sociology, and statistics.
Hey, David K., I would actually agree with you, and I actually am a journalism major from the illustrious University of Marquette. So I did get to Marquette in the early 80s and do have that journalism degree. And actually, the things that I got best from that journalism degree, there were a couple of courses in the journalism field that I actually enjoyed. There was actually a creative writing course taught within journalism, and there was a course taught by George Wills, who was, of course, the press secretary for LBJ. So I definitely remember those courses. But, you know, Marquette is also a Jesuit university. So it definitely is about liberal arts and that kind of liberal arts kind of teaching. So that's
and
actually
rigor,
what I use more. Right. And that's actually what I use more, is more of that kind of true education of the across the board kind of education that the Jesuits like to put out there. And that helps in my critical thinking and all that. Hey, Nick, when I first brought Barbara to the network, the first thing that she asked me was, what the heck is an international broadcast media, and what are they doing, and how is this thing being done on the internet? So I'm going to toss it to you so that you can actually answer that question for her while she's here in the room with us, because she wanted to know what was going on with this network, the plans for it, and all of that, because that was the first question she asked me. Lotus has also asked similar kind of questions. So I've got, you know, what's that old saying, that if you got the horse there, don't hear it from another mouth, hear it straight from the horse's mouth. So
you weren't supposed to tell all, Mark, you weren't supposed to tell all that business, Mark.
It's not that exciting, Barbara. I mean, the thing is, I tell people, if you want to see what we're doing, just go Google Cheddar and Google Pluto TV. Okay, and all I'm doing is following the blueprints of Cheddar TV and Pluto TV, which actually were pretty successful. And now all of a sudden there was another one that just came out that's pretty successful in terms of streaming media. If we go to the NAPD conference, the National Association of Television Professional Executives, it meets in Miami Beach and in Budapest, which is part of the reason I'm in Europe. But because of COVID-19, they're not going to have the Budapest meeting, so I'll go to one in Miami. But basically, there's a trend towards streaming media and away from the cable networks. It's just like journalism. Like I posted journalism major. It's basically, a dying industry, even though some of us people here were in that industry. And the real problem is the television is dying industry to streaming media. When we start IBM TV with actually IBM, believe it or not, here in the Raleigh-Durham area, who since then were divested away from IBM because they want to do computers and cloud computing. And they're horrible at media, Barbara. Also, that's the other thing. They are really horrible. Listen, we had the head of IBM IoT. We're doing a sequence with them, with the attorney on the line in Armonk, New York, saying you can't use that word, you have to use the word elephant. Well, you can't use that word, you have to use the word. I'm going, how can you run a TV show if the attorney has to tell you everything you're going to say? You can't. It's impossible. So IBM is the dream, the impossible dream. So we went our separate directions. And we started the IBM TV, which we bought. But then IBM said, wait a minute, even though you own IBM TV, that's ours now. So they took IBM TV from us, like no kidding, through WIPO. It's a long legal thing, but they basically own WIPO, so they just took it. So we created International Broadcast Media and the Pod TV network, which we're moving forward to capture the 4.3 billion people that are on streaming media today. And right now we broadcast in 122 countries with 65 shows. Our plan is actually to expand that, so we have more shows, and we're in more countries, and maybe even go on the sinking ship with cable TV. Now, why would we do that? Even though cable is sinking, it doesn't hurt to find, how do you say it, the partnerships. Why the ship goes down the tubes? They're pretty big, and in the United States, where we broadcast as well as India and around the world. Here's what's happened with the media industry. In the 1970s, there were 50 companies that controlled 90% of media, 50 companies. Mm-hmm. Today, in the United States of America, you have 5 companies that own and control 90% of everything you see. Okay, so what you had is a shrinkage. What it does, it squeezes out opportunities for a lot of good people like yourself, and frankly, a lot of good people. They're never going to be able to make major media in the United States because the job is already taken. It's like being a Supreme Court justice. Good luck with becoming one. Okay, there's only 9, and it's not expanding. So what's happening when that demographic changes, it creates a whole world of opportunity to streaming media, and they can't stop us. We're not governed by the FCC. We're not governed by anybody. We have, what was that? Not circular 280, but they have Rule 280. You're exempt from litigation.
Section 230.
Section 230. Thank you, David. That exempts you from litigation. So you have an ability to actually take your product and expand it worldwide, which we did already. 122 countries. We're not in China yet. Russia we're having problems with, but I can go through all that stuff later. And so a professional speaker like yourself, who morphs into media, because there's a change. If you're doing a live presentation, you get feedback from the audience. Yeah. You can walk up and down. I mean, it's a whole different game. The minute you're in front of a screen, it's flat, it's boring, and the thing is, it's really hard. You have to do what you do on your show to make it a very exciting and very entertaining, and that's a morph that professional speakers have to learn to do. In other words, morphing from live media to streaming media. It's a morph. So that's what we're doing at the IBM TV network. Like I said, we went from a year and a half ago, we had 0 shows, and we're in no countries. Today, we're in 122 countries with 65 shows and growing. And if you want to see what the business plan is, I just say Google Cheddar TV, Google Pluto TV. Just follow the blueprint of the people that were already successful. And that's basically our business plan. So it's nothing, not rocket science.
It doesn't sound like rocket science, but it sounds like a great plan and all of that. Hey, Barbara, I want to toss it back up to you and everything, because I know that you are also a masterful interviewer. By the way, Nick has already told me that as far as he's concerned, you're the next Oprah and the next big Oprah star. He's already told me that several times. So he's already told me that. So I'm going to let you have the next 10 or 15 minutes, and you can throw some interviews our way, because I know that you are also a masterful interviewer as well.
Way to put me in the hot seat there, Mark. So I guess I want to start with Larry Robertson. Tell us more about how you started in the industry you're in and what makes it interesting for you to be in that industry.
Yeah, actually, Barbara, I'll start with the reverse. So I'm not really in a single industry. What I do is a weave of several things, from advising leaders and their teams about growth, how to anticipate growth, how to deal with growth, how to create growth in their organizations. That's one thing I do. I also have written 3 award-winning books, but I also write articles and for a variety of publications, and I speak. And all of those things, in a way, could be considered their own separate industries or their own separate sectors. And yet for me, what led me there and what I love so much about what I do is that they feed one another. And when I move from one to the next and allow them to feed one another, I never get bored. So that's really what ultimately enticed me. Was it's exciting. I like what I do.
That is amazing. I love that because it sounds very cohesive. And there's nothing better than being in a position where your industries collide, coincide, and cover each other. So that's fabulous. So David Kaye, thank you for that, Larry Robertson. I loved it. I may have to reach out to you. I may need some help in your area, from your area of expertise. Let's go next to David Kaye. You talked about being in journalism 50 years ago. I can hardly believe that. What did you start at, 2 maybe, or 3? I don't know.
I started at 17. I was recruited at 18 by the San Jose Mercury. I was a staff writer at 19. I made the front page in a matter of just weeks.
Wow. So what is it?
And when I was hired, the guys around me were like, "You hired who? What?"
So what is it that you do these days that keeps you excited about just life, doing what you love to do?
Well, my friends and I started DC Report when Trump, as I had warned people from the get-go in 2015, might get to the White House. He got there. We started DC Report to cover what would be done to our government. We weren't worried about coverage of palace intrigues at the White House, but we didn't think, and I think we're proven correct, that there wouldn't be nearly as much attention paid to the damage done to our government. We're still running DC Report now that we're back to a just normal screwed up federal government. I teach 1 semester at Syracuse Law. Wish we had enough students enrolled. I could do both semesters again, 1 day a week. I'm not a lawyer, but I've taught there since 2009. I just finished my latest Trump book. The trilogy is now done. No more Trump books. And I've gone back to starting this morning when I got up, finishing a book I set aside 6 years ago, which is I have created in detail and outline, I guess I should say it the other way around, in outline and detail, a 21st century federal tax system that every expert who's gone over it, business people, accounting professors, tax lawyers, all agree works. They don't think the public will buy it, but every one of them says, yeah, this works. It will make us all better off. It allows much lower tax rates. And it ends our situation of having 2 tax systems, separate and unequal. One for the 90% who are employed, and the other for people who own their own businesses, particularly though those who are national or international in scale and who the IRS cannot possibly properly tax under the current system because Congress doesn't give them the tools to do it. And it allows shrinking the IRS down to smaller than it is now and yet being more efficient through taking advantage of the digital age technologies. And everything in my proposal is already in the law. There is nothing radical about it at all. It's all existing law repurposed.
When does that book hit the market?
Well, I have to finish it, and the key is it's got to be very short. You can't write a doorstop, right, and tell people I'm going to simplify the tax code. I'm hoping to have it done by the end of September. That's also when I'm hoping to start my show on this network, the Money and Power Report, about all the illicit money sloshing around the globe, as much as $50 trillion. That's 30 months of the entire economic output of the United States in the hand of criminals.
Well, I really want you to put a date on the calendar for that. I need to have that like October the 1st. Finally.
Okay.
Put
Yes, Mom.
There someday is not on the calendar, you know what I mean? So we need to have that October 1st. Okay, just saying. All right,
Got it.
Bill Danko. Oh my God, The Millionaire Next Door, one of my all-time favorite books in the world. What's on your plate these days that we should know about? What are you doing?
Boy, I'm enjoying life. You know, July was absolutely fabulous. I was in the Adirondack Mountains with my 5 grandkids and their parents as well, my kids, and going back up this coming, well, in a few days. My point is this, there is such a thing as having enough.
Yes.
You know, and in terms of material wealth, I'm doing fine. And I'm grateful for that. There's no question. Yeah. And I also enjoy pretty good health right now. So I'm going to enjoy. Yeah, I do have some speaking engagements coming up, and that's wonderful. And, if I could just give one anecdote, I did, 10 years ago, when it was called Amway anyway, we had 12,000 people in an arena, and I was on at like 3 o'clock in the morning. It's like a revival.
Yes, it is.
And when you have the Klieg lights shining at you and you can't see anything but the front row, but there's 12,000 people out there, all you have to do is get an infectious laugh from maybe 1% of the audience, and you know that you've created some sort of rapport with them. So sometimes it's easier dealing with these very large scale events than it is with 30 students in a classroom, that's for sure. Or looking at a computer screen right now, hoping that there are millions of people watching, but who knows? But anyway, I was very fortunate that during the 1970s, when my career was being created, I was told, Danko, you got to go get a PhD. You're a natural in the classroom. And I enjoyed the classroom setting, there's no question. And being at the university for 31 years was wonderful. Great colleagues, opportunities to write. Get this, you get paid to write. It's a great country or what? So my career has really progressed in the sense of, there's the writing, there's the public speaking, but also now there's the enjoyment in watching the grandkids, and they're getting one-on-one tutelage from yours truly, guiding them on the facts of life. So that's what I'm doing.
I always say that it's a joke, but I always say, if I had known my grandkids were as fun as they are, I would have had them first.
Yeah.
That's a really good point.
But
there are a few things in life better than holding a happy baby and the baby starts crying. You go to your child, here.
Here's your problem.
That's right.
Well, we're at the hour, so I do want to thank our special guest, Barbara H. Smith, for coming with us today on the IBM TV network. And hopefully we'll see you back in September 20th will be our next date for Media Monday. So we do want to thank our viewers from around the world listening to this. It was a great conversation and great to have you, Barbara. And while I'm overseas, I'll be watching your show because when I was in Italy last time, I could watch the IBM TV network over in Italy. So in Italy and Switzerland.
And I know you're getting ready to hit that button to get us on out of here and everything. But Barbara, who do we have on Tuesday? So who is our featured guest for the upcoming show on tomorrow? And do we have any idea what some of the issues will be on Face the News on Thursday?
We do. On Tuesday, tomorrow, we have Lisa of Lisa's Plate. She is a chef, and she's coming to talk to us about healthy and not healthy plates that we can have. And then on Face the News, we're going to talk about 3 segments: business, entertainment, women's issues, and inspiration. So we have some topics coming up. I won't divulge them right now because we're running out of time and because I want to keep them a secret. So thanks for having me.
And you can watch this show anywhere in the world. I've already tested that out, except for China and Russia. Sorry, we're not into those 2 countries, but anywhere in the world on the IBM TV network. And we will see you next time on our second season or Media Monday. See you then.